Hey, Chris, thanks for being on the show.
I am thrilled to be here, Jay.
So I'm really excited because the last interview that I did on this podcast, I had never met the person, never talked to them before, and didn't really know their business that well. And you and I go way back. We've known each other for years. We do very similar things. And so I'm just excited to dig into this conversation on business to help other people figure out, hopefully, how to build a business that lasts.
Well, I hope I can add some value to the listeners today. And for what it's worth, I think it's interesting because we have met face to face maybe once.
Yeah.
And the rest of our relationship has happened online. So just the way that our friendship has built over the years, being primarily digital, I think is also an interesting little aspect to this.
Yeah, you know what I think is interesting about that too, not to side tangent too much, but it's something I always tell people about social media in general is it really is all about relationships. Like it's an opportunity to do what we would normally have done at a networking event years ago, but even less salesy than that. It's just an opportunity to like get to know people and what are they doing and what are they up to, so that when you do run into somebody in person, you're like, I feel like I know this person. And I think that's kind of how it is.
It is, and the same relationship principles apply online. But I think that's what people get wrong is they think it's this whole different medium. So they have to behave differently and they do things that they would never do in real life. And that's why those relationships never go anywhere and they don't get the ROI out of it. But if you just stick to the same principles, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And we may get into some tactical conversation since both of us do the same things. I'm sure there'll be side points where it's probably valuable for people to hear. I know a lot of people get stressed out and worn out over marketing, trying to figure out what works and doesn't work. So hopefully we'll find some time to side tangent into some of those things. But before we do, let's talk about business as a whole. How long have you been doing what you're doing now? How long has the company been around? And kind of what does your start look like in the role that you're at now?
Sure. So I am in my 11th year. I should say I'm in my 12th year. So I've been at Web Strategies for just over 11 years. The company has been around for 15 years. And this was my first real job out of school. I took a year off to play drums in Japan after graduating from school. I figured out that this is what I wanted to do, and we could get into that story if we want to. And I thought this was just going to be kind of my first gig, get some experience, move on to something else. But amazingly, I've been here for over 11 years, started at the ground level as an entry-level employee, and I became president 3 years ago.
So that's an interesting transition into the role, and I think that'll be unique. A lot of the people that I talk to on the show are founders. They started the company from the beginning, and you had a little bit of a different pathway along the way, kind of coming into the company, just first job out of college, trying to figure out what you're going to do, maybe even still, as a lot of us were at that stage of life. And you've kind of grown up to where you are now, which actually is kind of hard to do sometimes. I think in smaller companies, people sometimes feel like there's not an opportunity for that. There's not like a clear or as clear of a ladder, I should say, as there might be in the corporate environment. So talk about that a little bit. How did that transition happen over time? What did that look like to get to the president's seat where you are now?
Yeah, so there's a few aspects to it, and off the top of my head, there might be three points to make here. See if I can remember all three as I get through these. First of all, and you mentioned you speak to a lot of founders, and I think it's important to recognize that a lot of founders, their path was circuitous. It was not everybody was selling rocks to their neighbors as a kid, and if you didn't do that, you can't run a company.
Right.
I think a lot of people just feel, if I didn't have that story to tell, then I'm not really, suited for the role of the main guy or gal in a company. But you may have that kind of fire within you says, I want to do this. And I felt that all the way back to when I was in school. I worked for a small business and I got a taste of what that was like. And from that, I was like, I want to do something in this vein at some point. I knew that. And that was validated. Just last week, I was going through one of the books that had a big influence on me when I was in my early 20s, and I'd lent it out to somebody. They gave it back. I had not touched it in many, many years. And within it, I found a letter that I wrote to myself on the eve of starting this job.
Wow.
In 2008. Yeah, I didn't remember that I had written this letter, but within it, I had said, here's what I know today, being June of 2008. And one of those things was, I want to run a company someday. So I knew that back then. And I went into this job with that mindset. And actually, as I was thinking through that time, I did realize that as I was looking at all my opportunities that I had and all the possibilities, and this was really on the eve of the market crash. So it didn't feel like doom and gloom out there at the time. So it was like, kind of like today, you feel like you could make money doing almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
One of the possibilities for me was maybe I'll start my own thing. That was one idea. The other was work with a smaller business. And then the third was go work at a big ad agency in New York City, because I wanted the experience, living in the city and city life and all that good stuff. So I always knew deep down that I wanted to do something like this. I didn't necessarily have that original entrepreneur story of, this was always in my DNA. I couldn't do anything but this. Kind of a mix between, I think I could work for somebody, but I also really enjoy working for myself. I could sit in both those seats, and I think that's fine. And I think that's a lot more normal than people think it is. The third component to this, which is maybe, a lot of what you're asking about in your original question, was the path. So it was a smaller business. Now, when I came in, we might have been 6 employees. We're 25 now, but we were primarily a web development company. I was the first marketing person. I had the first marketing role within the company. And it was, shortly after that, the founder and CEO decided that we wanted to become more of a marketing company. And he thought I had the chops and the ability to always be the leader in that. So the marketing, what started as a single person role became a department, and a department became the entire company. And I was able to grow in that process and with that at that kind of linear rate. So I think that, and then also, this founder recognized early on, as part of his succession plan, because he's in his 60s now, he wanted to find somebody to give the company to. He didn't have anyone in the family that was prepared to do that because of their individual life situations. And he found me, and he and I just hit it off, and he's become a second father to me. So I kind of won the lottery in that sense, but I also had to step up and prove I was capable of it. And so the stars aligned to kind of put me where I am today.
So the role kind of became a department. The department kind of became the company to some extent. What advice would you have to other people out here that are maybe listening who have not started a business yet? Maybe they're in that early role that you were in, because it's a tricky spot when you feel that fire. And this is very different than where I was, so I'm only kind of imagining what it must be like. But you feel that fire to maybe want to run your own thing, but you need a job right now, and you need some experience. So what advice would you give to that person who's maybe sitting in that seat thinking, I might want to start my own thing, or I might want to climb in this company. I'm not sure how that looks. What would you say to that person?
I mean, that's a tough question, because there's a million ways to answer that and a million things you could say about that. But what I would say, the first thing that comes to my mind is there's no shame in working for somebody else, even
That's
if
right.
you want to have a business someday. Okay. You don't have to do it now to prove that you're that type of person, right? And, there's a lot of really interesting data on this. A lot of people think, well, if I can't create $1 billion company in my 20s, I'm nobody, because that's what Zuck did, and that's what, some of these other founders did. The average age of founders is what, like it's somewhere in their 40s, I think, like that, something like that. So what does that mean? It means that you've been working for 20 plus years for somebody else before you took the helm and founded your own company and ran your own company. So you've got a lot of career to live and go through before you get in that seat, before you're anything close to being an outlier in this world. Okay. So patience is a big part of this. The reality of a lot of people live many careers. A lot of people live many careers before they get into this, and that's totally fine too. So don't think you need to live someone else's playbook in order to ever live it at all.
Yeah, I think patience is probably one of the most undervalued things right now, because we live in such a instant gratification world. I always make this joke about Netflix because my kids have grown up with it. I've got 5 little ones, and that's all they've ever really known. We canceled cable really years and years and years ago. And so they've never had a regular TV where you change the channel and whatever's on you watch. We were at a vacation one time, and there was a TV there, and they turned the TV on, regular cable, and the show was just starting to end. They're like, oh, let's watch another one. And I was like, no, there's no next one. Like it's the next show is going to come. Like, we don't want to watch that. We want to watch another one of that episode. And I'm like, that's not how it works. And they were so confused because they're so used to going, no, I want this now. And then Netflix goes, sure, here you go. You want another episode? You want another episode? And that's how we are with everything. We can ask now Google or Alexa or Siri for the answer to just about any possible question, and it will just give us the instant answer down to the, decimal place. And so patience is like, I'm seeing that a lot too with some of my younger team members, is that they just expect to be here right now where you are 12 years in to a company, and it just doesn't happen overnight.
It doesn't. And I see the same. Now, how much of that's environmental, hard to say. I don't think the environment helps make people more patient.
Yeah.
I mean, people have struggled with the concept of patience. I mean, you could go back and read the most ancient of ancient texts, and patience, according to whoever the guru was of the time, preaches patience. The challenge that we have today is that, patience has always been a pain point for people. People always want more sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And technology has enabled that, right? Has reduced a lot of that pain with with the smallest, most minutia things in our daily lives. So it's a muscle that we don't get to flex as much today as we used to. But all that aside, I think as people get into their careers, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a Netflix of, becoming the CEO of a company, because there are hard and fast realities.
That's right.
To that. So, the rest of the world could change around that. But if you're going to play this game, those realities I don't think are ever going to change. So they're going to change in some way, but not in terms of the timeline. That's a fact.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of those hard realities, because going from an entry-level role to where you started to president of a company in that time period, and going from 6 employees to 25 employees, there's going to be some struggles along the way. There's going to be some things that you go, gosh, I'm not equipped for this. I don't know how to deal with this. What were some things that, as you think back, you kind of stands out in your head that you go, oh man, that was a really hard season that we had to go through, or a really hard thing we had to learn, or that maybe you had to learn, not even the company as a whole, that you've now figured out, maybe a solution to or a way around?
Yeah, I gotta say, Jay, I mean, it's been pretty easy the whole time. Nothing, I can't think of a single. No, look, it is. I truly believe it is the hardest. Like, outside of raising little kids is really hard.
Yeah, that's a fact.
This is really hard. There are a few things in life that there's not much to compare to. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is one of them. And I would say the hardest time in this role was right when I took over as president, because there was another layer of difficulty on that sandwich, which was we had just acquired another company. And the day I became president was the day our 2 teams met for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And it was actually announced to my team at the same time that I was taking over as president, and that we had acquired another company. Okay? And the founder, being, kind of the throw you into the fire type that he is.
Here's the deep end, swim.
I don't even think he was there. By the way, my first day as president, all right, another layer to this, it was our retreat, our quarterly retreat, where we go away for 2 days and we're just together for 2 days. Okay. So those are hard enough to manage, like a big group of people, and try and keep everyone interested and bring value in that whole thing.
Right.
But I was doing all these other things on top of that. That was the single hardest day I ever had. And it was the first day that I had.
Wow.
But everything that came after that as well, that first year was challenging. Merging a company is a really hard thing to do. And it was probably our lowest, probably our highest attrition, lowest growth year that we've ever had. Which is exactly what everyone wants, it's their first year at the helm. But I mean, some of that was my inexperience. Some of it was just the inherent challenges of merging. How it splits out, I'll never know. Maybe I'll get more clarity on that later. But I think one of the things that kept ringing true to me in that first year, as I was trying to get my grip on the wheel of this giant vessel, what was a giant vessel in my mind, was that it's almost like trying to play chess with pieces that are alive and move around, and they don't always do like normal chess things. So it's like, you're the rook, you go there and you guys stay there and you can only move this way, and it like just wanders into the next box and like moves away it's not supposed to. You're like, it's hard enough to play chess. It's hard enough to think strategically and make good strategic decisions that create the outcome you're trying to achieve. But like, if people are not following the rules as you go and not following the plan, it's like, it becomes stuff that's outside of your control largely. At least in the day-to-day, as someone running a company, you can ultimately control that stuff and get rid of people and replace pieces as you need to. But that's where it was just that reality of going from being, the starting shortstop of a team where all I had to worry about was my side of the left side of the diamond, to being the general manager, where you only put the people in place, and then at first pitch, it's out of your hands. You have no more control, and everything is just the byproduct of all the thought that went into it, but you're not making the actual physical decisions on the field at that time. And that's just a big leap that I had to figure out and had to make, and that anybody has to make when they get into a role like this. But eventually,
real quick, how big was the company when, how big was your company, and how big was the other company when y'all merged and when you actually took over? What did that look like? Was it 6 and 6 or
14 and 6? So we brought the 14, they brought the 6, so it brought us to 20.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's just really interesting.
And there's an important point in there, Jay, is that, we faced a lot of challenges in that first year. Okay. And as we kind of figured things out on our own and implemented the necessary changes that got us over those humps. What I came to learn in doing more reading and research on this later, listening to podcasts, talking to people who run agencies, is there is an inflection point there in that like low teens, 14 to 15 or so people, where what you did with fewer people than that will not work with more than that number. And we had figured, we got hit in the face with that, right? But it's not an uncommon thing, because now you create these layers and you don't have as much direct contact over what's happening, and people have to learn more through osmosis. There's all these factors, and this is where culture starts to become, I think, really important, because you can't just be so directly involved in things. People have to act more based off of the values and the intention that's been laid out in front of them.
Yeah, that's huge. I always say people can wing it to about 10 people and $1 million, and anything past that, you have to have a different plan, probably a better plan, probably an actual plan, versus like what a lot of people do to get to where they start out with. And we're not as big as y'all. We have 17 right now, and going from 8 to 10 to 12 to 15 to even we are now, I felt like each one of those steps had unique challenges along the way that, there were moments where I'm like, did I do the right thing? Like, should I have just stayed 5? Because it was easy. Like I knew what was going on. I was in full control. Like I could just direct everything. And then now it's at a point where that's not true anymore. Like I have to depend on other people to do things because I can't do it all. I'm in here doing a podcast right now. I don't know what's going on out there. Hopefully they're doing a great job for people, but I can't micromanage it. You said there that there were necessary changes that had to be made. You did a lot of reading and studying and kind of consulting with other owners along the way to figure out what to do. What were some of those changes that you ended up putting in place that helped you get through that difficult season?
I would say there were a couple primary things that we learned from that. One was we had to become more consistent. The big thing was we had to become more consistent with the work that we were doing.
Yeah.
Okay? And so we diagnosed 2 reasons why we weren't able to do that. One was a lack of detailed process around what we do. Okay. Now in our world, in the marketing world, especially because we do so much SEO and so much paid search and social advertising, that's really our bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
There's, hundreds of hours of research and trial and error that have led us to believe this is the right way to do it at this point in time. And that will change year to year. But at this point in time, we know what's going to stack the odds most in our favor. We got to make sure that every client benefits from that. Mm. Right? It's I wouldn't say it's inexcusable, but it's totally unacceptable that you have this massive knowledge and not every client gets it if that's what they're paying for. It's a shame if they don't. Well, how do we solve that? Well, we're very clear. This is the process for doing this. If we're doing local SEO, boom, 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 this is how we do it. If we're doing this kind of on-site SEO, boom, 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 this is how we do it. Now, these are not set in stone. These are going to change. And everybody knows that if they feel like this is not effective anymore, everybody can blow the whistle on that, to use a topical phrase. But still, the point is, it's a very clear expectation about how it gets done. Okay, that was one. And that's how we made things consistent throughout the organization from an output point of view. The other big piece was around the industries that we target. Now in marketing, marketing is difficult and a lot of marketing doesn't work, and it's the game. It's a game of failure. It's like baseball. It's a game of failure. Okay. But you have so many like boisterous marketing gurus, air quotes, who talk about it like, well, if you just hired me, or if you just did it this way, look, it's easy, stupid. All right. It doesn't have to be complicated. No, it's complicated. Like, yeah, it's hard. And a lot of it doesn't work. Okay. So what can we do to, kind of shield ourselves from that vulnerability? And one of our solutions was, well, look, we've figured out the puzzle. Let's look at all of our clients. Who are the successful ones? What industries are they in? And then, look at them objectively, and we'll see, hey, what we do, what we're really good at works really well in this space. So we solved that puzzle, and the client has given us the time to solve that puzzle. All right, well, let's pick up that solution and bring it to others where they have the same problems, right? Versus, trying to solve these issues for all these different industries that have all these different challenges and all these different variables. I mean, that puts such a burden on the marketing specialist internally, or the analyst, or the account manager, because they've worked their butt off to solve the problems of this one client. Now we bring this other client in who's in a totally different space. The other client was B2C, this one's B2B. The other one sold, was a lawn care company. This one sells machinery. All right, well, you're a marketer, you can solve both. No, your chance of failure goes up significantly the more problems and the more variables that you're dealing with. So we said, all right, we've got these detailed processes of how to do marketing effectively for this industry. Now let's go out and get more like that. All right, and so we totally built up and invested in our sales model to go out and prospect and find them. We invested in our own marketing so that we could eat our own dog food with this, and sell to clients what we were solving for ourselves. And that was probably, I'd say, that mixed in with tighter role definition, because this is another challenge that you get when you go from maybe 10 to 13 or so, where everyone's wearing different hats, to you're bigger now. People have to have more specialized roles. So putting more definition around that and developing and training people for those roles so that they can be more consistent in what they're doing and ultimately get better at what they're doing. I'd say that was probably the biggest takeaways that came out of that year, 2017, 2016. Yeah.
And that's a lot of stuff that, are not easy problems to solve. They're not things that you just go, oh, we'll just flip this switch and now it's working that way and we're really great. I mean, those are things that took, I would imagine, a lot of time and energy to sort through. As you were doing that, did you have like a leadership team internally that kind of came around you to help figure that out? Was it you and the founder? Was it just you? What did that look like as you were trying to figure that stuff out?
Yeah. So again, it was really me leading. The founder kind of moved off, was starting his own consultancy. He would always be there if I asked for his, opinion or input on something, but it was really me. And I think probably one of the mistakes that I made early on in that is I was shouldering a lot of that responsibility to try and figure it out. And so I took a lot of it on, but I created, one of the things that I do believe in, and I did believe in back then, was inclusivity, especially on some of these problems. Now, those two statements kind of contradict each other, so I can clarify a bit. The leadership team was still coming into focus at that time. So I wouldn't say that we had this leadership team that was really going to war together on these problems.
Right.
It started to form organically, kind of like the salamander walking out of the water, like analogy. It kind of took shape as we went, but that was not what it was in the beginning at all. But I did build teams and said, hey, this is what we're going to solve together. I brought in my specialists who are really responsible for the back end work of what we do, like some of the back end marketing. I said, here's what we're trying to do. This is what we're trying to solve. And you guys we're all going to be the guinea pigs to figure this out together. So I was super clear on the intent of what we were trying to do. And then, we came together, we laid out a plan. Everybody had their own responsibility. But you know what, the ironic part of this, Jay, is that they were not my senior people. In fact, they were probably like my most entry-level people. So I was working directly with them because my thought was, since we still had so much to define as a company, I had to look at the people where I felt like we're getting the least amount of attention. And I could be totally wrong on this, but at the time I just felt like if I can start with the people on the ground floor and be very clear about what we're trying to do and involve them in that, then that can circulate up. A lot of people believe in the top-down approach, but I don't know why it felt right to me at the time. Let me start on the ground floor, really establish this culture, establish, trust and loyalty amongst these people. And then I can get to the other people later, but at least the other people could kind of, hold their own a little bit in the meantime. And, I just couldn't give as much oversight to at the time. So that's how I approached it. I probably would have done a lot of it differently knowing what I know now. But for some reason, I felt compelled to go to that small group and said, hey, we're going to do this together. And I was doing almost exactly the same things that they were doing. I was as hands-on as they were with it.
Yeah. I think figuring out that team along the way is really hard for a lot of people too. I know for me, that was one of the biggest struggles, was learning how to hire well and ultimately learn how to fire well too. And go, hey, this isn't the right time anymore. While also feeling like I had this massive responsibility to maintain culture and relationships and all this kind of stuff. Let's talk about like building the actual team. You have people that leave, you have people that you have to choose for them to leave, and then you have to go find new people. What are some of the things along the way that you've done that have helped you put the right people in the right seats? And ultimately, how do you decide when you go, hey, this person can't be here anymore, we're going to have to make a change? What does that look like for you from a decision-making standpoint?
Yeah, so I've learned a few truths over the years as it comes to this topic. One, I prioritize DNA over experience. Okay, because I can teach the skills, I can give them the experience, I can't teach the DNA.
Yep.
Okay. So I always, in fact, every time I've hired for experience and skills coming in, it's almost never worked out. When I hire for DNA, those people tend to thrive. Okay, so that's a truth that I've come to hold pretty tightly. I haven't tested that at some of the higher levels in the company because fortunately I haven't had to go to the outside to bring higher level people in who really do need that experience. But at least on more the mid to entry level roles, DNA is number one. The question is when it's time. I think a lot of empathetic business owners, as I think both you and I are, we tend to take too long to do what needs to be done. And there's probably somebody that we're thinking about right now. It's like, yeah, I could right now, but I got other problems to deal with, So there's always there's always that like list that I think every business owner has in their mind. But the problem with that is a lot of it's subjective, right? And it's a big decision. It has big consequences. And we have to take that responsibility very, very, very seriously. And it can't be emotional, right?
Yeah.
So, it's always going to be hard. I think, when on the topic of letting people go, I think it's very important to frame it as, look, we ultimately want what's best for them. And we want them to have the best career that they can have. And the reality is, if we see these problems within our organization and we have done everything that we can to try and make them be successful, because remember, we work for them. We got to think of it like that we work for them, and it's our responsibility to help them be successful. Ultimately, it's on them to do what needs to be done. But if we feel like we've given them that chance, we've given them the feedback, we have to make the decision, then ultimately we're doing what's in their best interest, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen here, right? So I think, that sounds kind of like a corporate line sometimes, but I think I really think that's the truth. And if we really believe that, we've done all the things that we can, then ultimately they're going to look back and be like, yeah, that was kind of the right decision. And I think they will come to that realization if are rational, at all. The other thing though, another element of that, Jay, is I'm a huge believer in core values and the importance of core values. And I think a lot of people undervalue their power and what they can mean to an organization. And I think they've become a great North Star for being able to evaluate somebody and if they are a fit for the company, because those are, if you are vocal enough and intentional enough about those core values being spread throughout everything that you do, then when somebody breaks those tenets, you can point to those and be like, look, this is what we're about. This does not align with that. And here's why it's an issue. And here's what needs to change if this is going to be a place for you. So that way it takes, you kind of remove the just, basic, performance numbers and like, what were your sales numbers or what were your retention numbers or what your clients' results? You take that out of it and it becomes more about, is this the right fit for you as a company? And the core values, I think, help fill in some of those gaps that you would otherwise have if you were just looking at more quantitative metrics.
Yeah, it's interesting because your number one, which is DNA over experience, kind of relates to the third, which is core values. Because if they have the right DNA, usually they're a core values fit too. I mean, that's kind of the look of what you're looking for. But to go back to the second one, which is when do you make that decision? I mean, gosh, I think you and I are in total alignment about how we feel about it. I mean, for me, like I hate having to let somebody go, because to some extent I feel like I failed them, because all along the way I'm going, I can make this person better. I can find a way to fit them in. I can find a role. I can fix all the things, and I can't. And at some point, there was a team member I had to let go who'd been with me for a long time. It was really hard because we were good friends, but it was the right decision for the company after a very long decision-making process. And now he's doing great. He started his own thing and he's doing awesome. And so it's like, that speaks to exactly what you're saying. And there's some advice I don't like, although everybody's got their own opinion. They're entitled to it. I think it's Gary Vee actually talks about this. He says he hires fast and fires fast. I actually take the opposite approach. Some people say hire fast, fires, or some people say hire slow, fire fast. I actually think it should be hire slow, fire slower. And the reason I say that is, if I'm the one that decided to put them in that position in the first place, I need to make sure, one, that it really isn't my fault. Like, is there something that maybe it's not me personally, but the company is not being clear enough with their role. We're not being clear enough with the expectations, and give them an opportunity to be nurtured along the way and help get better. Because that's one thing I really struggle with, is ultimately radical candor, which is a common catchphrase from a book that's out right now. And I am that ruinously empathetic leader sometimes, and I have to work really hard to be more direct, because when I am, I see the fruit of it and I'm like, oh man, like they know that I really do care about them, but my job is not to be everyone's BFF. It's to lead them. And leading sometimes requires hard decisions. Often requires hard decisions. So I just love those three things you said: DNA over experience, figuring out the right time to fire or let go or whatever it's going to be, move on. And then third, core values, which is a great segue into the next thing that I was going to circle back to. Earlier, you talked about the importance of culture. And I think this is hugely important, but I also think it's one of those words that companies and leaders and books toss around and say, hey, you got to have a great culture. So what does culture mean to you? How have your core values helped shape that? And how do you know when you're kind of going, hey, it feels like culture's right? Like, what is it that you look around and go, okay, this is doing what it's supposed to be culturally and has nothing to do with dollars?
Culture is, this has been a loaded topic for me over the years. And it's, as somebody who's more analytical, it's sometimes been hard for me to wrap my head around it. Going back to that chessboard analogy of things moving around, very organic, right? There's a lot of culture within that too. It's planting the seeds, communicating the intent, and then having people think for themselves, right? But think for themselves in a way that's aligned with the kind of company that you want to be. So there's a lot of interesting, quotes people have on this. Culture is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Things like that. just speaking from personal experience here, where I think culture has been most defined for me. And I don't know that I can bottle this into like a single sentence necessarily, but it's consistent execution of the values of the company.
That's good.
From top to bottom. Okay. Now, how do you do that? You have to be so crystal clear in what those values are. And, you know, I see them on your wall behind you, and I've seen that wall many times. Now, what I don't know is what you guys do to, you know, exercise those values besides talking about them, besides putting them on a wall. So, you know, for example, our values are GEAR. They spell GEAR. Okay. Growth, essentialism, empathy, accountability, and doing what's right. GEAR. Why do we have it spell something out? Because it's easy to remember, right? So that's a good starting point for people. Everybody's got to know what they are. And when new people come in, I spend a lot of time. We have exercises on them, and I ask people what they represent. We have in our Slack channel, we have a GEAR channel. So anytime someone exemplifies one of the core values, it could get called out there and recognized in the channel. When we do our quarterly retreats, I'll pick a core value and we dedicate group exercises and a whole day to that theme. So in 2 weeks, we have a quarterly retreat. We're going to take empathy. So we're going to spend the whole day talking about and doing exercises around empathy. You're going to be empathy out the eyeballs over these next 2 days, right? The quarter before, we did essentialism, okay? And we talked a lot about what was the matrix? Like there's 4 boxes around urgency and I
know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but like everything, like you want to aim for box 2 activities, right? Which are the not urgent but most important.
Important but not urgent, right?
Yeah. And so we really focused on essentialism. So it's just so widespread what these core values are, that if you hold true to those and you behave within those, the culture and the behavior and the day-to-day actions, I think should be aligned with those core values. If they're not, I think it's pretty objective that person and their actions are not a fit, right? So we can either choose to work on them, address them, and they have a chance to fix them, or they're just not a fit for who we are.
I love those ideas. The Slack channel, I'm going to steal that one, and we're going to do that. And I'm going to steal the quarterly group exercise too. So thanks for that input. That's what I love about doing this show. I always tell people, I told my wife when I first started, I was like, the great thing is I'm going to talk to other people who've been in business, a long time. And I get to kind of go, hey, what's working really well for you? And some of those things, like we're in heavy alignment on core values. That's how we review each other, both in peer reviews and top to bottom. And we have a document called the DE Way. And in there, it lists all the core values, and it doesn't just list the core value and even describe it. It actually gives examples of what does this look like on a daily basis. Because one thing to put joy on a wall, it's another to say, what does joy look like in a client meeting? What does it look like when you walk in the door? What does it look like when something bad happens? And we kind of define those things out. And then what we do from a review standpoint, instead of doing performance reviews and all those kind of things, which, we still care about those numbers for sure in a lot of areas. But our actual peer reviews, we do, they're anonymized, and we do them biannually, and they're just 6 core values. And it asks, based on this description of this core value, does this person usually, sometimes, or rarely align with that core value? And it's a really interesting way to kind of see some feedback. And I just got them back. And honestly, out of 17 people, maybe 17 people, I'm like number 10 of most aligned based on the sheer raw score. And I was looking through the feedback and I was like, well, yep, that's accurate. Yep, I do that. Yep, I need to work on that. And so it was really helpful for me. But I love that idea of recognizing the positive as well in that Slack channel, going, hey, so-and-so really crushing it on this core value. Here's what happened. Here's what they did. I love that. So really cool stuff.
Yeah. And another couple points on that, you talk about this podcast, it really helps you. So this is just this is all selfish play for
That's
Jay.
Right. This is a big selfish play.
But when you do these exercises, when you put so much emphasis on it as the leader, you can't hide from them. Yeah. Right. Because you're always talking about them.
That's right.
So, and look, culture comes from the top down. Every company is some expression of the person running it. Okay. And so, that's, if you're 10 out of 17, then, there's probably a lot of room for not just you to grow, but for the entire company, because
Yeah.
if you're number one on that, that's going to permeate down throughout the rest of the organization. So it serves, several different purposes, I think.
Now, thankfully, the good thing was this was the first time we'd done this, and the team was exceptionally well aligned across the board. Matter of fact, we had there's a certain number that the goal is for nobody to be under that, and nobody was under it. So everybody kind of fell within the standard that we had set, which was exciting to see. But some of the feedback, like one of the negatives or constructive feedback that I had was Jay sometimes likes to jump into projects to try and save them, but then doesn't carry them through all the way to the end. And I was like, yep, I do that. I need to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And
which core value would that?
I don't remember now. It was probably quality of the output of the product is most likely the one that it fell under.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me shift gears a little bit because we could talk all day, and ultimately, maybe one or two people might listen to the end of our 8-hour conversation. But I do want to kind of round it out a little bit. And there's a couple of things I always like to ask. And one of them is really important to me. I don't really like this term, but it's the one everybody's familiar with. And it's work-life balance, right?
Yep.
You got family, you got friends, you got other activities, and you have a business to run. But if you're not careful, the business will, if you allow it, to suck every single second of life out of you, especially when you're the one who ultimately responsible for all the final decisions, if you will. So what does that even mean to you? What does work-life balance mean to you? And how has that changed maybe through different seasons of life to where you are today?
Well, it's absolutely changed. And that's just part of, personal development, right? As you grow. But I think this all begins with self-awareness. Mm-hmm. You got to understand what you're trying to get out of this one precious life that you get. And that hit me between the eyes when I was 29. My first daughter was born in September. And then in October, I was diagnosed with leukemia. Okay. And in a very kind of ironic and strange way, if you haven't been sick like that before, it sounds weird. If you have, it makes total sense. It's the greatest gift I've ever been given. Okay. Because when you go from thinking that your life is going to be this big, long timeline, like your arms outstretched, that's how much time I have, to all of a sudden, it's only like as much time as you could put between like two fingers. You're like, oh my God, it's like Sunday night and you're like, what did I do with my weekend kind of feeling, versus I have the rest of the year to do what I need to do. So that was a huge wake up call for me. So it all begins with, what do you want to get out of this one precious life? Okay. And for me, that changed over time, because in my 20s, I didn't have a family. Okay. I got married at 29, had our first child at 29. And my plan had always been bust my tail in my 20s, work 6 days a week, and then get up, to a good velocity and altitude with my career, that I could start to, split my time a little bit more, because my time would be split. And that's, it happened to just play out. It actually worked, go figure. But I always believed that I wanted to be like a quote family first guy. Okay. And I learned two things about that. One, I said it for a long time before I actually meant it, because I would have preferred to be at the office, being productive, getting stuff done, than sitting at home and not really being productive. I'm an active guy. I like to get stuff done. Okay. But as your kids get older and you really fall in love with them and who they are and where they're becoming, then you get more drawn to that. But the other piece that I really learned was family first. I don't like that. It's not that I don't like the phrase, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because, okay, family first, what does that mean? Does that mean that like every decision you have to make every day it's always putting the family first? Well, if you did that, then like, why would you be going to work? Why would you not be at home, like making sure your kids got all the attention that they need to become the best human? Like, it doesn't, look, you got to make sacrifices. So for me, the family's a priority. On the day-to-day level, I still have to make sacrifices if the long-term goal is still focused on them. And it is, right? So my goal is to be able to be as involved and provide as much as possible and maximize the experiences I can have with my children and my friends, my family. Okay. But to do that, like, money helps that a lot. I got to make some, right? Like, right. I don't want my kids to have student loan debt. Okay. So I was putting money in their accounts before they were born. All right. I want them to, there's a lot of things that I want for them, and I want to be able to experience things with them. And I talk about, all right, when you turn 16, you pick anywhere in the world, and you and I will go and do a daddy-daughter trip. Just the two of us. You can pick anywhere in the world, anywhere. Gotta have money to do that, right?
Yes, you do.
So like, and if I could build this business, get it to a place where it could support my family, allow me to do those things, then that's the ultimate win. And the more I work on myself and learning how to manage people here, and I take those lessons back and I can raise my children better, then I'm going to achieve the ultimate outcome, which is still prioritizing my family. Okay. But I have to make those sacrifices along the way, and you have to do it on a day-to-day basis sometimes. So I think if you really understand the macro, big perspective, but also understand, hey, gut check, this could end any day. So if it does, are you going to be at peace with the decisions you're making every day? If you feel like the answer is yes, then, balance, whatever. But
Right.
I think you're making the right decisions for you in your life.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Michael Hyatt, who I absolutely love. And he talks about this on one of his podcasts. He said, people ask him about his kind of order of priority of things. And he says, it's basically like God, then him, then his wife, then his children, then his business, something like that. And people are like, well, wait, you put yourself above your wife? And he's like, well, yes, because if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of my wife. If I don't take care of myself, I can't be there for my kids.
It's the oxygen mask on the plane.
Right. It is.
Why am I putting on not my kid first? Well, if you can't breathe, your kid's not
you're in
have
trouble,
a chance, right? Yeah.
And so that was an interesting for me to hear, because I thought, oh yeah, I guess I do need to do some of that. And I like to pretend that was like 10 years ago. That was like pretty recent. So, I'm still figuring it out and still learning as we go. So what's next for you? What are you working on now? What do you got? What are your hopes and dreams of where you're going? I mean, obviously I don't want to spill any company secrets, but, just vision wise, where do you kind of see yourself? Where do you see the company in a few years out? Where are you headed?
Well, as far as the company goes, my desire is to continue to grow. How big? I don't know. I don't have a number in mind. But I think I might get to the point where I'm like, I like where this is. Maybe I'll feel that way. I don't know, but I would like to do more, because I still feel like we can do better work, which I take a lot of pride in, with more resources and more people. And so I want to keep climbing up that way. And we've been fortunate to be able to do that. Okay. So we've grown every year we've been in business, and this year included. So I want to keep doing that. Now for me, I do want to fully own a business one day. Okay. I know that. Is it web strategies? Is it another one? Time will tell. But I think if you really want to achieve wealth in your life, you got to have equity, or get really lucky some other way. So I do want that to be part of who I am. I have, some now, but not a significant amount. So that is kind of the next thing. And whether that's buying into an existing business, whether that's kind of tapping into some of the networks I have and starting something, and bringing some other founders on, or whatever. I'm involved in the startup community. I mentor the startup community in Richmond. I'm a member of a CEO community in town. So I'm around a lot of really smart, ambitious, risk averse people. And I would like a swing at that in some shape or form. And this has been, look, I'm 12 years in or whatever to my career. And I was describing it to someone the other day. I feel like I'm still that jet sitting on the runway about to take off. I still feel like the best stuff. I still feel like the success that I think I'm capable of is still beyond what I could imagine right now. And I'm playing that game to get there while enjoying each day as I live it.
That's the way to do it. I mean, I think that can be a blessing and a curse, that feeling, but it's also, I think it's where you have to be if you want to grow a company. You have to have that feeling. I always say, I'm the least comfortable when I'm the most comfortable. And what I mean by that is when I start getting super complacent, I'm missing something. There's something not right. I'm not living up to my full potential. And I mean, gosh, I'm 20 years deep in this company, and I just feel like we're just starting to break the box open. We haven't even looked at the present yet. I feel like we got so much left to do, and it's really exciting. And you guys have grown, faster than us because you're at 25 now and got all kind of stuff, awesome stuff going. So I really appreciate you taking the time today to kind of share some of those ideas and some of the struggles of real life, because that's ultimately what I want other people to hear when they listen to this show is, hey, these things that I'm going through that are really hard, that's normal. And there's other people out there, and hey, here's some ways in which they kind of overcame them. So I really appreciate you sharing those stories and peeling back the curtain a little bit. If there's any parting advice that you'd give when you're talking to somebody who's trying to build a business that lasts, you're over a decade into the business that you're in now, what advice would you give them? Maybe something we haven't covered, maybe a follow-up on something we've already covered. What kind of stands out that you go, hey, here's something I wish I had told myself or known 12 years ago?
I'll go practical on this one versus in the clouds. So I was saying this to somebody the other day who was getting started in their business, who was describing themselves as somebody who's like, oh, I like to try new things, or like, I like to, I like to do a lot of things, because sometimes I like to do this, sometimes I like to do that, and I'll do that too. I said, that's great, but you're going to have to make a choice. Do you want to just keep doing things that you find enjoyable in the moment, or do you want to actually build a business? Those are two different things, frankly. Not that it's not enjoyable to build a business, but you're going to have to get disciplined and start shaving the junk off. Okay. So you're going to have to make that decision at some point. Am I intentionally trying to build an actual business that I can scale, or am I or do I just want to be able to kind of do what I enjoy doing at that time of year or that month or whatever? Okay. That's one. The second is the pipeline is life. Control your own destiny. Okay? A lot of people take pride in being referral businesses, and I get that. We were that for a long time, but as somebody who's now built a sales team and a sales machine and a whole bunch of processes around it, I sleep a lot better at night knowing that my pipeline is life. Another one is to only sell the things that you're committed to getting better at. That's kind of become my golden rule, because Will Reynolds shared this with me. It's one of my favorite lines, which is, customers will remember you for what you do the worst. Okay? So our golden rule has become that we only sell the things that we're committed to getting better at. Related to that, look, I get it. When you're in the early days and you're small, you take whatever business you can get. I get it. I get the appeal to that, and I get sometimes even the necessity of that. But it does create a lot of scaling and quality issues, and you can create a lot of bad impressions as a result. So now, at what point do you do this right away, or do you have to get up to a certain kind of cruising altitude before you can take the step? I'm not quite sure, but I have found a lot of success doing fewer things more deeply than trying to do too many things. So we really narrowed our offering as a result, and we've been able to thrive and do much better work and get a lot better word of mouth as a result of that. And then finally, I mentioned this before, but your core values are more important than you think, right? They're the North Star of your company's morality. So especially as you grow, and there are people coming on fast, and people are trying to understand what this place is about and how they need to behave to do right by the culture and by the company, those core values can spell it out, especially as that founder gets, there's more distance created between the person running the company and everybody else. So you don't have direct control, but those core values are the same from the intern all the way up to the CEO. So take them seriously and do whatever you can to make sure that you keep attention on them. They don't just kind of sit in a document on Google Drive, or, they're only written on a wall. But instead, you're actually finding ways to explore them as a group as you go. I think that will really instill them.
Yeah, I think that is a lot of really wise counsel. So if you're listening to this, you should rewind it and listen to it one more time, especially that last part there. Just really good ideas that are really practical, that I think I've seen in play in my own business, and some things that I still need to make some adjustments on. So Chris, I really appreciate the wisdom. If people want to find you online and kind of learn more about you, your company, and what you do, what's the best place for them to go? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so, ironically, I've been off of most social media for quite some time. I still have all my accounts. I'm just not as active. I'm active on LinkedIn. So just search Chris Leone, Web Strategies. That's the company. I'm active on LinkedIn. I go on Twitter every now and then you can find, our website online. You can get to me that way. And yeah, not Chris Leone from Oracle. because he's also like the VP of Oracle. And I got the Chris Leone Twitter handle before he did, but whenever Oracle's doing like some big keynote, I get tweeted at from people who think I'm him on stage. But yeah, at Chris Leone is my handle on Twitter, and then LinkedIn, you can find me there too.
Awesome. Chris, thanks so much for your time today. I think you're going to be a great asset to everybody who listens.
Thanks so much, Jay. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good luck, everybody.
Hey, I hope this video has helped you with some tips and ideas to build a business that lasts. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on the next videos that we roll out. And more importantly, for some awesome free resources, head over to our website at buildingabusinessthatlasts.com. You can get a free copy of my book there where I tell you how I have built an agency that's grown year over year for the last 20 years in a row. So go grab that, buildingabusinessthatlasts.com, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. We'll see you soon.